Why don't you take it away, Kathy?
I'm going to try to share my screen and let's hope this works. Hold on a second. Let me move this here. There you go. Now you've got it. Okay, so you've got my screen. So first of all, I want to say good afternoon and thank you for allowing me to speak with all of you. The broadcast industry, as I spoke earlier, holds a very dear and special place in my heart, since that's where I began my career in this industry. I know I'm here to talk about the A10.48 and what it is and what it should mean to you. But before I really get into that, I want to give you a picture about NATE. What is NATE? How did it start? Because it's very crucial that you know this to talk about the A10.48. We were actually the National Association of Tower Erectors. We are called NATE, the Communications Infrastructure Contractors Association now, but we began as the National Association of Tower Erectors. And it all started because a broadcast contractor was returning from a fatality investigation, and he contacted 4 other broadcast contractors about needing to start a trade association for our industry. If you know anything about the 1926 OSHA standards, they kind of do not cover the tower industry. They actually leave out telecommunications. So they asked for a meeting of contractors, and a plan was put together to meet in Dallas, Texas. And believe it or not, there were about 60 contractors that showed up at that first meeting. And now we've grown to over 1,100 members. So we consider ourselves the voice of the tower construction, service, and maintenance industry. We are the industry leader in tower safety through education, standards, and professionalism. And I'll go through some of this stuff. One of NATE's missions statements states it's to pursue, formulate, and adhere to uniform standards of safety to ensure the continued well-being of tower and communications infrastructure personnel. My job is to help the guys in the field. So let's first talk about what NATE does with our safety resources. And this is important. It's all going to tie back to where we're going with A10.48. If you go to the NATE website, we started a NATE Safety and Health Manual online resource library. The very first thing that I was tasked to do when I was hired for NATE was to finish this manual. There's 62 chapters. It's something like 450 pages. And the contractors that are within NATE don't download this and say, hey, this is our safety manual. These are guidelines that can be utilized by different contractors to make their own safety manual. So they tailor it to their own construction company and their own contractor company. So if they don't work in confined spaces, why would you put a safety chapter in your manual on confined spaces? This is just as a resource guideline for our members. When I talk about NATE doing safety, I talk about some of our training initiatives. NATE actually wrote a climber rescue training standard, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But the standard is intended to assist in standardizing fall protection and rescue training for climbers in the tower and communications infrastructure, construction, service, and maintenance industry. It's a mouthful. The new streamlined, and we call it the CRTS document, presents a series of training topics. It establishes a minimum baseline of knowledge and skill that a climber should possess. It is referenced in A10.48. It is a free document, and the only way we can reference it in A10.48 is to make it free to anybody that would like to have it. Now we're working on something called the NATE rigging training standard. I have it in here that it's being developed, and I will tell you that I finalized it with the committee yesterday. And it is being sent to our board of directors for approval. It has been a 2-year project, and there's nothing within the A10.48 standard that tells you what is a minimum requirement for rigging training for our industry. You know, Crosby has a lot of programs to give you training on their pieces of equipment, their rigging hardware, but there's nothing written about what is a minimum requirement for a tower guy. So our rigging training standard helps contractors with how they develop their training program to train the people that are working on your job sites. NATE also for several years has received a Susan Harwood grant, and that allows us to do training in specific items that are prevalent in our industry that we need training on. Of course, fall prevention is always number one, but the NATE member safety subject matter experts have helped write some of these Harwood grants. Typically, we'll have 12 to 13 classes for a year, and we'll have anywhere from 35 to 40 people to go to these classes. This year, we're doing it on PPE for telecom workers, but we've done rigger awareness training, advanced rigging, rooftop deployment, 5G, small cell, electrical safety. They're fabulous grant programs, and once we are done, they are on the OSHA website, so anybody can pick them up and review them. I do need to tell you about our STAR Initiative program. It's really a program that is designed to have our members show that they are continuing dedication to tower climber safety. To be in the STAR Initiative program, you must have requisite levels of training, meaning OSHA 10 for all the guys out in the field, OSHA 30 for your superintendents. You have to implement a safety and health program. You've got to have the presence of a competent person on your sites, and you have to submit site safety audits. As you can see, we had about 172 companies that participated in this STAR Initiative program, and they did about 3,855 site audits last year. It's kind of crazy. In these audits, they identified about 1,049 different hazards. 17,000 employees were impacted by it. It also shows you that they said they had 7,800 employees trained to the OSHA 10, 61, 64 to OSHA 30, and then there's a whole bunch that are OSHA 500. And check out the number of training hours that just these 172 companies say that they provide 454,000 man hours of training to their employees. They also have the NWSA certifications, and that's, I'm not going to go into that right now because that's a whole different program. Years ago, NATE had an association with OSHA. We had a partnership, and we've asked about 3 years ago if we could have the partnership again. We added the FCC to our partnership. Brendan Carr has been a tremendous asset to our industry. He's a climber. He's been on many of our towers. So 3 years ago, we started the partnership. Took us through COVID, so there wasn't a whole lot that was done, but we just renewed, and I can tell you that it is going strong, and I'll show you some of the fun stuff that we do because of this partnership. The partnership has an executive team. There's 10 members on the executive team. There's 10 members on the steering team. One of the members on the executive team and steering team is from OSHA. One member is from FCC. One member is from our NATE. And then we have 7 members of each one of the teams, and these are voting members. They make decisions for the partnership. One of them is a NATE member contractor that is broadcast. One is a NATE member tower contractor that is wireless. One is a vertical real estate owner. One is a carrier, telecommunications carrier, and one is a construction management member. And let's see if we can go through. We have taken this partnership and we've started to review the data, incident data that is happening in the field. We have a data and research team that has reviewed industry incidents, and we get these from OSHA. We get them from the STAR industry, you know, the audits that are being done. And we've been really lucky. We also have pulled in data from insurance companies and contract management groups. The data team puts into the buckets, you know, all about these incidents, and you can see that we've got dropped objects, material handling, fit for duty. And we're finding out, you know, where are the problems that are out on the job sites. You can see that we have RF listed, fall protection. These are the incidents that we see that are going on in the industry. And NATE uses this data to try to help come up with additional safety training, additional help for our members. If they're lacking some training on RF, what can we do? We have an RF awareness program that we started. So now let me talk a bit about, whoops, I've lost my track. Let me talk a bit about ANSI and ASSP and how we got into the A10.48. So who is ANSI? They are the American National Standards Institute. It provides a fair, ANSI itself is an institute that provides a framework for fair standards development and quality conformant assessment systems, and continually works for safeguarding the integrity of the institute. ANSI utilizes an organization called ASSP, the American Society of Safety Professionals, to be the secretariat for some of their standards bodies. Why is it important for you to know this? So if you look at safety from a requirements standpoint, you have the laws. You have the Occupational Safety and Health Act, that's a law. You have the Fair Labor Standard Act, it's a law. You have the Clean Air Act, that's a law. And then you are governed by regulations. You have the 1926 regulations, OSHA, which is construction industry. And then you have the 1910 regulations, pardon me, which is non-construction. And then you have industry standards, consensus standards. These are the recommendations or operating practices created by a group of experts that has been agreed upon before adopted. The consensus standards are developed through a process that is open to participation by representatives of all interested parties. And we had in the A10.48, we had tower owners, we had safety professionals, we had contractors, a lot of different members that were all consensus people. So why is it important? Should contractors use construction and demolition operation standards? The A10 part of the ANSI A10.48 is the standard for the construction and demolition operations in construction. This is the consensus body for construction and demolition. So our A10 standard, A10.48, falls within construction and demolition operations. And so we started with the A10.48, which is a subgroup of A10. If you look at A10, I got all my notes are in different directions here. Sorry about this. If you look at A10, there is several subgroups that are part of it. anywhere from steel erection is a subgroup, dredging, tunnels, pile installation, and you can see there's A10.28 is for wind turbines. Safety requirements for drilled shafts is 23, 24 is low roofs. And then you get down to where does A10.48 fall? We are a subgroup of the A10 standard. So let me talk about A10.48. This standard is specific to our industry. Consensus people that got together to look at our industry to decide how safe operations of our industry should be done. And yes, that is me, and that is me at 1,100 feet on the tower in Nashville, Tennessee. And the picture to the right is I got to work for a company that did work on the Empire State Building. Broadcast is in my blood. So let me talk about where A10.48 came from, and you guys will understand some of this nomenclature. It started with a document that's what's called ANSI TIA 1019, and it was an engineering standard for use of gin poles on towers. TIA 1019 was up for revision in 2011, and Ernie Jones, who's near and dear to my heart, was responsible for redoing the 1019. And Ernie put into the 1019A, he included, instead of just design and use, which is engineering, he started adding some means and methods of doing work on towers. And means and methods needed to be removed. TIA does not do means and methods. They're an engineering standards body. So a meeting was held in St. Louis, and they said, we've got to pull the means and methods out of TIA, and it needs to be handled somewhere else. And that's when they put it into the A10, which is construction standards. So we took the means and methods in the ANSI ASSP A10.48, and the TIA took all of the engineering part of the TIA 1019 and put it into a standard called TIA 322. Both of these standards have been reviewed and renewed. They fall together in the same years of revisions, and it's because they work very closely together. 1048 talks about how to do a job. TIA 322 talks about the forces on the tower when you're doing your construction. So A1048, the real title to it is Criteria for Safety Practices with the Construction, Demolition, Modification, and Maintenance of Communication Structures. It provides a comprehensive safety guidance on doing work on communication structures. The standard includes sections, pre-job planning, site conditions, fall protection and rescue. You can't do fall protection without having rescue. Radio frequency, we have a section on base-mounted hoists, personnel lifting and accessories, rigging, gin poles, climbing facilities and access, structural loading considerations, training programs, cap stands, demolition, helicopters used for lifting external loads, and electrical safety. You can see that it is extremely comprehensive. So let's talk. I don't know if you've been familiar with the original standard, but the revision that was just completed has a whole lot of updates. We've changed the original standard, had a lot of comments that said you should do this, you should do it. We've changed it to you shall. If it's a standard, it means you need to do it. So we focused on minimum requirements as opposed to a mix of minimum requirements and recommendations. The standard now says you shall do something. We eliminated the redundant content that was in other standards. We had put a bunch of stuff in here taken from other standards, and instead of rewriting it, which adds a cost to the bottom dollar, we just reference the other standards. So if you read it for the rigging side, we reference the ASME B30 standards. Those are all rigging hardware instead of actually writing the standard into it. We eliminated some generalized statements from the standard. If you want to do something general, you put it in notes or you put it in the appendices when necessary. We reorganized the contents, for some improved flow. And here's a really important thing. We started listing some stakeholder roles and responsibilities. What's the stakeholder's role for the owner client? What's the stakeholder role for the structure owner? What's the role for the FCC licensed entities? What is the stakeholder role for the contractor or the employer? And what's the stakeholder role for the qualified engineer? And with you guys on the broadcast side, you know that when you're doing some work on your towers, there's rigging plans involved. So we talked about what kind of plans does a contractor have to do a job. When he comes out onto a job site, what does he have to do? There are several plans that we wrote into the A10.48. And they are, you've got to do a site-specific construction plan. What class is it? Does it include rigging? Got to do a job hazard analysis. And I'm going to break some of these down a little bit more involved. I'm just going to tell you what extensive plans a contractor has to do. They have to designate a competent person. Who's the one that's in charge that can stop jobs? Who's the one that you go to for questions? They have to have an RF safety plan. Could include lockout, tagout. Pre-lift plans. Here's the crux. Everybody has to have a fall protection and a rescue plan. It's not important to have a fall protection plan without a rescue plan. How do you get somebody off the tower if they're in trouble? Helicopter jobs. And that was really important during the broadcast work for the repack. What's the flight plan? What's the lift plan? So let's talk about job hazard analysis. Job hazard analysis is the process of breaking something down into component parts to understand it. When we do a job hazard analysis on a job site, according to A10.48, at a minimum, a contractor should consider the site information, the site access, the structure information, verify an emergency action plan, construction plan reference, structural hazards, job site exposures, such as lead-based paint, or the fun ones are there snakes involved? I can still remember a broadcaster telling me down in Florida, he goes, yeah, it's alligator mating season. You guys need to be aware. Or there's a beehive on top of the tower. Or snakes. Snakes are always fun. What's the fall protection and rescue plan? What's the RF EME hazards on the job site? What's your plan? How are you going to control or mitigate some of the hazards that you see on the site? Who are your authorized and trained individuals to do the job? If you've got a base-mounted hoist, who's your operator? Who's your competent person? Who are your climbers? Have they been trained? Is there any site work, hot work, fire protection? Of course, the standard safety data sheets, general safety and warning signs. You always see warning signs go out on your job sites. And what is the PPE equipment? Tools are the inspected and documented. It's a lot. The A10.48 covers a lot. So let's talk a bit about a construction plan, because this is really important for you all. The A10.48 revision changed rigging plans to construction plans. It doesn't mean that we eliminated rigging plans. It was an effort, and this ties to 322. It was an effort to encompass the proper roles and responsibility for overall construction activities, not just rigging. Anything that would affect the integrity or stability of your towers. Class 1 construction plans no longer exist, but that doesn't mean you don't have to do them. They're now in a Class 2, which is done by a competent person. Every single construction plan needs to be documented. All construction activities that involve the supporting structure or its foundations shall have a documented construction plan, regardless if hoisting operations are performed. We're focusing on capturing larger scopes of work that may or may not include rigging, like this. This doesn't have anything to do with rigging. This is a foundation modification. But whatever we do on the foundation modification affects the integrity of the tower. So you've got to have a plan. What's your plan to support that tower while you open up a foundation? This is also when you start talking about doing a dig to block. I know you guys have heard that. What is the construction plan for protecting the integrity of your towers when you're doing this work? One of the other things that was significantly changed in the A10.48 standard, and you know, this is what affects your price of your jobs. A significant thing, if you've got a 2-person crew, you want somebody to go up and do an analysis or check something on your antennas. You can't have 1 person go on the tower. It always has to be 2. That's in the standard. And if you have a 2-person crew, you're allowed an authorized person, and you have to have 1 competent. And the authorized person is somebody that's been on a job site for 90 days or less. And that's spelled out in the standard. So any kind of engineering analysis you're doing on the tower, or engineering review, or any kind of review on your antennas, 2-person crew. If you have a 3+ crew, 3-person or more crew, you've got to have 2 competent people, and you can have 1 authorized. But you've always got to have 2 competent persons on a 3+ crew. All your equipment for your climbing, for your PPE, has got to meet the ANSI ASSP Z359 standard. That's written in it. And to do any work on a tower, you have to have not only a fall protection plan, but a rescue plan. And the climber rescue training standard is referenced in our A10.48, or you can follow the Z359, which talks about training. And I know you guys know this, but in the true hierarchy of safety, the way that we look at safety on a job site, if you can eliminate a hazard, you eliminate it. Remove the hazard. If you can't eliminate it, maybe you could substitute it, replace it with something else. The next hierarchy is an engineering control. You know, maybe you can isolate people from the hazard. We do a lot of protections of trenches. You're isolating people from the hazard. If you can't do that, maybe there's an administrative control. Can you change the way that people are exposed to the hazard? RF is a good one. You know, you have a certain amount of time that you can be exposed to a hazard, take them out of it. Heat's been a big one. How do you protect people from heat? Maybe administratively, you work different hours of a day. And the last hierarchy on a control for safety is PPE. That's the least effective way of protecting a person. That is, protect the worker by PPE, because all the other items that you've done can't protect them. So let's talk about some climbing facilities, and this is in the standard as well. New in this revision, if a contractor wants to utilize a climbing facility as part of their fall protection plan, the climbing facility must be inspected prior to use. So that you're all asking, well, how in the heck do you do that? So some ways the contractor has to crab claw his way up a tower. He can be tied off to it, but he has to crab claw and do an inspection of the climbing facility along the way. A lot of guys are using drones. They'll run the drone up to inspect it along the way. Too many times the climbing facility is damaged. The top cap might be broken or it's obstructed. Somebody has come in and they've hampered your climbing facility, encumbered it, closed it off, and the guys can't use it. So directly from the standard, it says the safety climb, including the top and bottom assemblies, shall be visually inspected to ensure proper installation and anchorage or load tested under controlled conditions. And straight from the standard, it says use. The climbing facility and or safety climb system shall be utilized in accordance with the fall protection plan as part of the job hazard analysis. You have to inspect it prior to using it. This does slow down your jobs. You'll say, well, what are the guys doing? Why aren't they just using the climbing, safe climb device and going up? According to the standard, they have to inspect it first. And here's something else that's pretty important to you guys. Because, how does it affect you? According to the standard, we put together stakeholder people. So when a contractor goes out on a site, who are the people that have to give him information, are required to give him information? And we state that the owner shall provide or assist in providing necessary information for the contractor to develop site-specific construction and job hazard analysis plans, including coordination with the FCC licensing entities for maximum permissible exposure purposes. How does the structure owner get involved? The structure owner shall coordinate with the structure engineer of record of the FCC licensed tenants and or designated representatives to facilitate the transfer of information needed to the contractor to develop site-specific construction and job hazard analysis plans when requested by the contractor. When requested by the contractor. The FCC licensed entities shall provide available information to the contractor regarding RF emissions that may impact work activities on the site. Such information may include power reduction and or lockout tagout procedures for RF equipment. The work activity may be on the subject structure or adjacent structures with active RF emitters. We all know that happens. A tower can be right next door. We did a job down in Tennessee to remove a top mount antenna. The TV station that was next door was encumbered by what we were doing on our tower. So I'm going to go back. Remember, I had this slide from the beginning, and the slide from the beginning said the National Association of Tower Erectors. We are now NATE, the Communications Infrastructure Contractors Association. We do the same thing, but what's happened, the industry has changed. We're not all broadcasters anymore. There's a lot of wireless people involved. So we've adapted to the change in the industry, but we are the same people. We have the same mission statements. We are doing the same thing. And why do I think being part of NATE is important? Being part of NATE gives you a voice when standards are written. We are very active in writing the A10.48. I believe the broadcasters are industry leaders. Your input is extremely important when we put together standards. What we put in there, we need input from you all. And what I believe is extremely important also is being part of NATE opens lines of communications. It gives you people to contact. You can call me and say, I need to know blah, blah, blah. I can help you find that information. We do have a NATE Unite coming up in 2025. It's our 30-year anniversary, 30 years. And it's real close to you guys. It's in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'd love for you all to come. And I want to thank you. You guys have been very quiet. You had permission to interrupt me, but you didn't do it.
Oh, we saved our questions for the end.
I'm ready. I think, I hope.
Who's got a question?
Well, I'll go first.
Hi, Joe.
Howdy. And I think you came to speak to our chapter in Norfolk some years back. So
I did when we were writing the first standard.
Right. I remember that. So back virtually.
That was back in like 2014 or 2015.
Yeah, it's been a while, that's for sure.
Yeah.
My question, should a crew arrive at a site to do a job and find the safety climb deficient in some manner, are they able to complete the job if they can by double hooking and not using that safety climb device, or does that safety climb have to be resolved first?
They can do the job without the safety climb. That's all part of your MSAs. You know, I don't know what's written into your contracts, but they can do the job without having the safe climb device. They can double hook all the way.
Okay, good.
But again, Joe, I'm going to preface that, Joe. I don't know what your contract documents say or what the contract documents say for whatever they're doing. If it says in the documents that there is one there and it's usable, that's a different story.
Right. Yeah, it clearly adds more time to get a job done depending on particular.
Correct.
Following that job, then I guess what does the structure owner need to know about repairing that safety climb? I mean, can they go forward just by not having it, or they got some obligation otherwise to restore that as soon as possible?
That's a TIA 222 question. I hate to give that comment. That's a 222 question because it's written in the 222 standard as to what's done for climbing facilities. If you have one on the tower, then it should be able to be used. There's maintenance involved.
Kathy and Joe, there's one thing to consider here, that a lot of times risk management overrules all of these things, because if the insurance that the tower owner holds or the contractor holds says that the safety climb has to be in operational condition, then they're going up the tower without any insurance. And the owner needs to know that, or the head of the contracting company needs to be aware of that, or the foreman, somebody. Anyway, run into that one before.
Yeah, it's all what's in your contract documents. So, and I can't speak to that. I can speak to what is in the standard. If it is there and they want to utilize it, it has to be inspected before use. And that's many times the guys have gone up and the top cap, you know, is hiding the fact that it's not connected or it's damaged or it's been obstructed or whatever.
I definitely had some questions if no one else did, and I'll kind of stagger them. All right. So this 10A48, if you're a NATE member, which I've learned, you can download that information. Otherwise, it's for sale. I don't see it available, or what? I'm asking.
It's for sale. A1048 is for sale. We are dictated by what we do by ANSI. So the document is for sale. I will tell you that you do not want to buy A1048-2016 because it's no longer in existence. And even if you had 2016, you would have to buy A1048-2023.
Okay.
What we did for A10, you know, the 2023 version, we made it smaller so it doesn't cost as much. If you go through NATE's office, then you can download it from NATE's office. If you go through ANSI, you can do the same thing.
No matter what you pay for it, even if we're a NATE member.
Right.
Okay.
No matter what.
Who buys it? I mean, are you going to say, hey, broadcaster, if you really want to be on top of things, you should buy this?
Contractors have to have it.
Okay.
It tells them what they're doing. It tells them what they have to do.
From my perspective, it's okay. I want to read it because, like, I'd like to see what they require for the PPE and the RF plan so that I can go to these climbers and say, hey, what's your plan? According to 10A.48, 2023, you should have this plan and let us know. But I don't have anything to reference unless I buy it. So I guess there's my answer.
There's your answer. I
Yep.
can tell you that all the tower owners have been involved, you know, the major tower owners have been involved in the development of A1048. And they use it all the time, you know, for rigging reasons. Well, it's now construction plan reasons, but they've all been involved in it. And it is a good reference document. I can tell you that it will be good for the next 5 years, at least. So a revision has to happen every 5 years. And the other nice thing about having it is that if you see something in that document that it's problematic for you, I can tell you who to contact me and give me what your conflict is, and we can work on it for revision for the next, you know, the next revision date.
Got it. Thanks. Any other questions?
As an old broadcaster, I can tell you what I saw a lot in the industry. I saw a lot of issues relating to RF, about when to turn down, how to turn down, why do we have to turn down? The broadcasters make money when they're on the air, and I get that. In the old days, everybody's like, well, just work at night. You know, I can shut down at night, you know, you can work at night. Well, it's not that safe at night. And some of the work that the guys were doing, you know, is tough to do at night. You can't see what you're doing. You know, yes, you can put a headlamp on, but if you're asking somebody to do an inspection up there, the headlamp only goes so far. So besides the fact that it costs 3 times as much because the guys lose time the first day because they get on site, then they have to rest before they work at night, and then they've lost the next day. So it is very cost prohibitive. You know, if you work at night, you're not going to work during the day the next day. RF has always been an issue. We always worked with the broadcasters for reducing power, for shutting down. Yes, the guys can go through it, shut down, or reduce power to let them go through it, but there's spaces on the tower that you can work, and you guys still have your RF equipment running, and you know that. And having a broadcaster involved is extremely important when you're working on a tower, or if you're working adjacent to it. An open line of communication with everybody. We talked about RF monitors. The guys all carry RF monitors. They have to make sure that, you know, when they do their plan, if they know what they have to work through, climb through, what is the frequency, got to make sure that their RF monitor covers that frequency. But you don't have to, if a crew is coming in to do work at 200 feet, you don't have to give them information for all the antennas all the way up at 1,000-foot tower. Give them the information that they need to do the work, you know, at 200 feet and below. It's just communication is key for you and for us.
Exactly. And I like the us thing because I'm trying to emphasize those of us in Richmond from the VPM tower site, which is an American tower. We've been dealing with that for the past few weeks. A lot of coordination, and I'm hoping we can make it even tighter. I'm hoping we can make it tighter to make it easier for all of us and safer for the climbers.
Yep. Well, and you know, I've had situations where it's been turned down at site and somebody at the home office has turned an antenna back up and they're like, what the heck? You know, so there's always, you know, we don't want to be mandating you got to lock it out and tag it out because that's hard for a broadcaster. But, you know, an assurance for a contractor when they're up there that they're not going to get hammered with RF is wonderful.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing they charge a whole lot more at night to go up.
Well, the cost of a crew working at night is difficult unless you've got a long-standing project that they're going to work there for quite a few days. but working at night, you only get 4 hours of work versus having 7 or 8 hours of work, just because, climbing is more difficult, seeing is more difficult. They don't, they can't even work with screws, it's more difficult. So you're not going to get as many hours of work out of a crew if they work at night. It's just one of those things.
Used to be more common for us, Todd, and I know John knows this because remember, we used to have nighttime tower climbs, but they are a rare event now, if ever. In fact, some tower crews have told me, nope, we will not do a climb at night. The last time one did, gosh, was 10 years ago.
The contractors are getting a little tougher about it because they lose so much money. It's like I said, for one night of climbing at night, it costs them 3 days of work with their guys.
Yeah.
So they're not doing 3 days of work. I
And
just
you
know
know
that
what?
from experience.
Sometimes we as broadcasters, we will tell, like in my example, it was actually probably a Verizon service or an AT&T antenna replacement. And we said, no, you got to do it at night. And they actually did. So that meant AT&T had to pay a lot of money to make that happen. And they did then, but more and more they're saying, nope, not going to do it.
It's not the safest way of doing the work for the guys. I mean, what's the face on your tower? What size face do you have? And you're telling these guys to go up these towers to climb at night where they don't see as well. And we all know that storms come in quickly and frighteningly quick. What looks like to be 7 or 8 miles away can hit you pretty quick. And if you're working at night, getting down in a hurry is pretty tough.
Great. Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much. And hey, Kathy, it was a pleasure having you.
Thanks for
I
asking.
hope we can see you again to speak about some other facet of the industry. And you will be at that meeting in Raleigh, that get together?
Oh, yeah. In the NATE Unite.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'll be there. Heck yeah, that's like 14 days of me being there. But we do have, if you guys don't want to go to the educational portions, we do have some passes for going into the trade show. The educational portions are really fun. As a NATE member, it's a whole discounted price to go to the whole conference. I mean, a big, huge discount for the conference. And it's good. We had, like I said, 3,500, 4,000 people there last year. It's crazy. When I first started, we only had like 1,200, and that was 11 years ago, 14 years ago. Yeah. So it's very large.
You may see me there.
Oh, I'd love to see you there. I'd love to
Yeah.
see everybody there. You have my email address. You can give it to anybody. You've got my phone number. Give it to anybody. I'm available for chats at any time.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.